Tom Brady discovers his first football trainer lost his home. His response shocks the world. Tom Brady was sitting in his office, the soft hum of his phone vibrating against the wood of his desk as he reviewed some recent game footage. Though retired from professional football, his life was far from quiet. He remained as committed as ever to his fitness, his business ventures, and his charitable endeavors. But today, as he sat there sifting through emails, one particular message caught his attention. It was from an old contact he hadn't heard from in years, his first football trainer, Coach Jack Henderson. Tom paused for a moment, surprised. It had been a long time since he'd heard from Coach Henderson, the man who had first taught him the fundamentals of the game. The same man who had shaped his early approach to football, instilling in him the discipline and drive that would eventually lead him to become one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. With a deep breath, Tom clicked open the email. The subject line simply read, "Can we talk?" Curious and concerned, Tom opened the message. The email was brief but direct. "Hey Tom, I hope you're doing well. I hate to reach out like this, but I've fallen on hard times recently. I lost my home. Things have been really tough, and I'm not sure who else to turn to. I'd love to catch up with you when you have a moment. I could really use some advice, or maybe just a friendly ear." Tom sat back in his chair, stunned. He read the message again, then again. It was hard to believe. Jack Henderson, the man who had taught him everything about football when he was just a young, ambitious quarterback, the man who had been there at every step of his formative years, now in a place where he was asking for help. Tom had known that Jack had always been a bit of a maverick, independent, stubborn, and fiercely passionate about coaching. He had always put his heart and soul into the game, often working multiple jobs to make ends meet. But this, losing his home? That was a different story altogether. Tom had lost touch with Jack after his own career took off, but they had exchanged a few messages here and there, with Tom always thanking him for his early guidance. Still, he had never imagined things could get this bad for his old coach. After a few minutes of processing the message, Tom quickly picked up the phone. He needed to hear the full story from Jack himself. There were too many questions left unanswered. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Tom?" Jack's voice was withered but warm, unmistakably the same voice that had shouted instructions and encouragement from the sidelines years ago. "Coach, it's me," Tom said, his voice filled with concern. "I just got your email. What's going on? What happened?" Jack let out a long sigh, the sound of weariness audible even over the phone. "I didn't want to burden you, Tom. You've done so much for me over the years. I guess I'm at the end of my rope. I lost my home a few months ago. Things just got out of hand. I've been trying to keep my head above water, but it's been tough. I couldn't keep up with the bills. The economy's been rough, and I've been bouncing from one job to the next. But it's hard when you're getting older." Everything started to pile up. Tom's chest tightened as he listened. He had always known Jack to be tough, the kind of person who would never ask for help, who would always fight through adversity. To hear him say that he had nowhere left to turn hit Tom harder than he expected. Jack had been there for him when no one else had, especially in those early years when Tom was still trying to prove himself. Jack had taught him not only football, but life lessons about hard work, resilience, and never giving up. "You never should have had to go through this alone," Tom said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "What happened? I had no idea things were this bad." Jack was silent for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "Well, Tom, after you left for college and then went pro, I just kept pushing forward. But when the coaching job slowed down and the bills started stacking up, I made some bad decisions. I tried to keep everything together, but I didn't have the support I needed. And now, well, here we are." Tom could feel the pain in Jack's words, and it hurt him to hear his former coach speak this way. He had so much respect for Jack, and he knew how much Jack had given to him. This was a man who had spent his life helping others, giving his time, his energy, and his passion to kids who wanted to follow in Tom's footsteps. And now, to see him in this position, it wasn't right. "You shouldn't have had to do this on your own," Tom said firmly. "I want to help, Jack. I don't know what exactly you need right now, but we're going to figure this out." Jack laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Tom, you've already done more for me than I could ever repay. I'm not asking for a handout, just a little bit of guidance. I don't know where to go from here." Tom sat forward in his chair, his mind racing. The idea that Jack, the man who had shaped his career from the very beginning, was now struggling so much, it was unthinkable. He needed to do something. This wasn't about money, this was about making sure Jack had the support he needed to rebuild his life, just as Jack had helped him rebuild his own. "Listen, we're going to get through this together," Tom said, his resolve firming up. "I'm going to make some calls, get you the help you need. I don't care what it takes, Jack. You're going to be okay. I won't let you fall through the cracks." As Tom ended the call, he sat in silence for a moment, deep in thought. He knew he had the power to make a difference, to help the man who had done so much for him. This wasn't just a gesture, it was a commitment. Tom Brady didn't forget the people who had shaped his path, and Jack Henderson was one of the most important figures in his life. Tom wasn't just going to help him financially. He was going to make sure Jack had everything he needed to rebuild, to find stability again. It was the least he could do. But as Tom thought about the road ahead, he realized that the path to helping Jack wouldn't be easy. This wasn't just about writing a check or sending a one-time donation. Tom needed to find a way to make a lasting impact, to give Jack the tools he needed to stand on his own again. With that, Tom made a decision, and the world was about to be shocked by what he did next. Tom Brady sat in his office late into the evening, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. As the weight of the current situation settled in, his mind drifted back in time, to the days when he was just another kid with dreams too big for the small town of San Mateo, California. Back then, football was the one thing that grounded him, the one thing that made him feel like he belonged, even when his body didn't look the part. But there was someone who saw past his scrawny frame, someone who believed in him before anyone else did, Coach Jack Henderson. It was a sunny afternoon when Tom first met Jack. He was barely in his teens, trying out for a local football team that seemed way out of his league. He had been overlooked by so many coaches before, never big enough, fast enough, strong enough to catch their eye. But when Tom showed up to the tryouts, Jack Henderson was there, watching with a keen eye. Jack wasn't like the other coaches. He didn't judge by the same standards. To him, potential wasn't about size or athleticism, it was about heart, drive, and a willingness to learn. The first time Jack saw Tom throw a pass, he didn't see a lanky, awkward teenager. He saw the future. Jack had seen thousands of players come and go, but something about Tom's determination caught his attention. That day, after the drills, Jack pulled Tom aside and gave him a piece of advice that would stay with him for the rest of his life. "You may not be the biggest guy out there, Tom," Jack had said, putting a hand on his shoulder, "but I see something in you. You've got the mindset, the work ethic. Keep pushing yourself, and the rest will follow." Tom never forgot that moment. It wasn't just about football, it was about believing in himself when no one else did. Jack didn't see Tom's limitations, he saw his potential. And that was exactly what Tom needed to hear. It was a lesson that would stick with him through his high school years, his college career, and into the NFL. Years passed, and Tom's career took off. He had the opportunities to work with some of the best coaches in the world, but every time he stepped onto the field, his mind would often wander back to those early lessons he had learned from Jack. He remembered the countless hours they had spent together, working on his footwork, his mechanics, and his mentality. Jack wasn't just teaching him football, he was teaching him how to face adversity, how to deal with failure, and how to keep going when it felt like the world was against him. As Tom rose through the ranks, from high school standout to a backup quarterback at the University of Michigan, and eventually to the top of the NFL, He never forgot the man who had believed in him when no one else did. Coach Jack Henderson had been a constant in his life, even if from a distance. Tom would send him postcards, check in during the off-season, but over time, their connection began to fade. Jack was always humble, never seeking the spotlight or recognition. To him, it had never been about fame, it had always been about helping others. And now, as Tom sat reflecting on everything that had gotten him to this point, it hit him harder than ever. He owed so much of his success to Jack. The mental toughness, the resilience, and the confidence to keep fighting in the face of doubt had all been taught to him by the man who had believed in him when no one else did. Jack had never sought anything in return, but as Tom read through the email Jack had sent him, he knew this was his chance to give back, to show his mentor just how much he meant to him. Tom had always been the one to face challenges head-on, but he had never imagined that Jack would one day face a challenge so great. As the memories flooded back, Tom felt a burning desire to do something meaningful for the man who had helped shape him. This wasn't just about offering financial support, it was about honoring the legacy that Jack had built, not only for Tom, but for all the young athletes who had passed through his hands. Tom couldn't let Jack, the man who had given so much of himself, fade into the background, especially not when he had the means to make a difference. With his mind set, Tom immediately reached out to his assistant to start making the necessary arrangements. He wasn't sure what the full plan would look like, but one thing was clear, he would help Jack, no matter what it took. It was time for Tom Brady to step up for the man who had stepped up for him all those years ago. But before he could make any final decisions, Tom knew he needed to hear more about what had really happened. He needed to understand the full picture of what Jack was going through. As much as he wanted to rush in and fix things, Tom knew he had to first listen, to hear Jack's story, to find out where and how he could make the most meaningful impact. Tom leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as he prepared for the conversation ahead. There was no going back now. He had made the decision, now, it was time to act. Tom Brady knew that helping Jack Henderson wouldn't be as simple as just offering financial support or sending a check. This wasn't a quick fix, it was about helping his first football trainer rebuild his life. So, Tom had made arrangements to visit Jack in person, to better understand his situation and learn more about the struggles that had led him to this point. Tom was determined to make sure he didn't just help in a way that felt convenient to him, he wanted to offer a solution that would truly make a difference. Tom arrived at Jack's small home on the outskirts of Wilmington, North Carolina. It was a modest place, nothing like the mansions that Tom had grown accustomed to. He parked his car outside and walked up to the front door, taking in the quiet neighborhood. He knocked and waited. A few moments later, the door opened, and there stood Jack, a little older, a little more worn, but still the man who had first mentored Tom with a relentless passion for football. "Hey, Tom," Jack said with a tired smile, stepping aside to let him in. "It's good to see you, son." Tom returned the smile, but there was a sadness in his eyes that Jack didn't miss. "Good to see you too, Coach." As they sat down at the kitchen table, Tom could feel the weight of the situation in the air. It was clear that Jack hadn't just faced setbacks in his career, he had been struggling, fighting battles that Tom hadn't known about. It was one thing to hear about Jack losing his home, but it was another to see him in person, a man who had always been a rock for others, now vulnerable and burdened by his circumstances. "I've been meaning to come see you," Tom began, his voice gentle but filled with concern. "But I need to understand what happened, Jack. You've always been the one to take care of things. What led to all this?" Jack looked down at the table, taking a deep breath before speaking. "I never thought I'd be in this position, Tom. When I first started coaching, everything seemed to be on track. I loved the game, and I was good at what I did. I helped a lot of kids find their passion for football. But after I retired, things didn't go as planned. The coaching jobs became scarce. The small leagues and programs dried up. I tried to keep myself afloat by working different jobs, but it was never enough. When the bills started to pile up, I kept hoping something would turn around. But then, my wife passed away a few years ago. That really hit me hard. She was the one who kept everything together for us. I've just been trying to keep my head above water ever since. Tom listened intently, his chest tightening as he heard Jack's words. He had known that Jack had always worked hard, but he had never realized just how much his mentor had been carrying on his own. Losing his wife, struggling with his health, and then trying to maintain stability with no real support. It made sense why Jack had kept everything to himself. He had always been so independent, never asking for help. But now, the cracks were showing, and Tom could feel the weight of everything Jack had endured. I didn't want to be a burden, Jack continued, his voice growing softer. I've always taken pride in doing things on my own. But when the house was foreclosed, it hit me hard. I'm not sure where I'm going to go from here. I've been staying with a buddy of mine for the time being. It's not ideal, but I don't want to take too much from anyone. Tom leaned forward, his voice steady as he spoke. Jack, you're not a burden. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I want to help. But I want to make sure that whatever we do, it's the right thing. You've done so much for me, and I can't let you go through this alone. Jack shook his head, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. I appreciate it, Tom, but I don't want to be handed anything. I've never been that kind of person. I want to earn my way out of this. Tom placed a hand on Jack's shoulder, looking him in the eyes. This isn't about giving you a handout, Coach. This is about making sure you have the chance to rebuild. I've been blessed with opportunities, and I want to pass that forward. But I'm going to do it in a way that respects everything you've worked for. Jack sat quietly for a moment, his eyes welling up with emotion. He had always been the one to help others, but now, for the first time in his life, he was the one receiving help. The vulnerability in the moment wasn't lost on him. It was difficult for a man like Jack, who had prided himself on being strong and independent, to admit that he needed assistance. I've always believed in you, Tom, Jack said quietly. When you were just a kid, I knew you had something special. I never imagined I'd be sitting here like this, asking for help from you. You've gone on to do so much, and I'm proud of the man you've become. But I don't want to take advantage of your kindness. Tom shook his head. You're not taking advantage. You gave me everything I needed when I was just starting out. You taught me how to fight, how to work for what I wanted. I wouldn't be where I am today without you. Now, it's my turn to do the same for you. As the conversation continued, Tom and Jack talked through the options. Tom knew he wanted to do more than just provide temporary relief. He wanted to set Jack up for long-term stability. Whether it was helping him find stable housing, offering assistance with medical care, or helping him get back into coaching in some capacity, Tom was determined to give Jack the tools he needed to regain his footing. But more than anything, Tom wanted Jack to know that he wasn't alone. He didn't need to do this by himself. Tom was there for him, just as Jack had been there for him all those years ago. As Tom left Jack's temporary home that evening, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He knew that this wasn't just about financial support. It was about offering his mentor the chance to stand tall again, to reclaim his life. And in that moment, Tom Brady was determined to make sure that Jack Henderson's story wasn't one of struggle and solitude, but one of resilience, redemption, and a lifelong bond between a coach and his player. The following days were filled with planning, phone calls, and organizing. Tom Brady's mind raced with ideas as he sought the best way to help Jack Henderson, his first football trainer, his mentor, the man who had shaped him into the player he became. It wasn't just about sending a check or providing temporary assistance. Tom wanted to ensure that Jack had the resources to rebuild, regain his confidence, and live the life he deserved. A life free from constant worry about finances, housing, and his future. Tom didn't just want to give Jack a handout. He wanted to create an opportunity for him, an opportunity to regain his footing, to find a sense of stability, and, most importantly, to feel respected and valued for everything he had contributed over the years. He began by reaching out to his business contacts. He needed to find a way to help Jack with housing, but Tom also realized that this was about more than just paying for a place to stay. He wanted Jack to feel empowered, to be able to support himself and not rely solely on others. Tom was determined to create a lasting solution, something that would set Jack up for success beyond the immediate need for shelter. As Tom sat down with his assistant to go over the logistics, the plan started to take shape. First, he would help Jack secure a stable living arrangement, finding a place that was comfortable and within his means. But Tom also wanted to give him something more, a chance to get back into coaching. Jack had spent so many years shaping young athletes, giving them not just football skills, but the life lessons that had shaped Tom's success. Tom knew that Jack had so much more to offer. "Let's get Jack set up in a coaching position," Tom said, his tone filled with determination. "I know he still has the heart for it. There's a community center in his area that could use someone with his experience. I'll make some calls, see if we can get him on their radar. He's earned the right to continue doing what he loves, and I don't want him to feel like he's done just because of his age or circumstances." Tom's assistant nodded, taking notes. "I'll reach out to them right away and see what we can do." The next step was the financial aspect. Tom knew that Jack's debt was a heavy burden, one that wasn't going to go away overnight. But Tom had the resources to help, and he wasn't going to let Jack carry that weight alone. After discussing the options with his financial team, Tom decided to set up a trust fund for Jack. This trust would cover Jack's outstanding debts and provide him with a steady monthly income, allowing him to live comfortably without the constant stress of financial instability. "This trust fund will take care of Jack's immediate needs," Tom explained as he reviewed the details. "It'll cover his debts, his living expenses, and ensure he's not struggling from paycheck to paycheck. He can focus on getting back to work and doing what he loves without worrying about money." Tom felt good about the plan. It wasn't just a one-time solution, it was a comprehensive approach that would allow Jack to rebuild his life. But Tom knew that while financial security was important, the emotional support would be just as crucial. Jack wasn't just going through a tough patch financially, he was dealing with the loss of his wife, the loneliness, and the sense of defeat that came with losing everything. Tom wanted to make sure Jack knew that he wasn't just offering money, he was offering his friendship, his support, and a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm going to visit Jack again," Tom decided, standing up from his desk. "I want to make sure he knows that he's not alone in this. That he has people who care about him. This isn't just about fixing the situation, it's about letting him know that his contributions, to me and to so many others, have never been forgotten." As Tom prepared to head out to meet Jack, he reflected on how much his life had changed since those early days. From the time he had first stepped onto the football field as a young, hopeful athlete, Jack had been there guiding him. He had been there when no one else believed in him, when Tom was just another kid trying to make a name for himself in a world filled with bigger, stronger players. And now, it was Tom's turn to be the one offering the support, offering the hand up to the man who had shaped him into the person he was today. As Tom arrived at Jack's temporary residence, he could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of years of struggle taking its toll. But there was also a glimmer of hope, something that had been missing when Tom had first arrived. Jack was still the same man who had taught him how to face challenges, how to work through adversity, and how to stay focused on the end goal. "Hey, Coach," Tom greeted him warmly as he walked through the door. Jack's face lit up as he stood to greet him. "Tom," Jack said, his voice filled with surprise and gratitude. "I didn't expect you to come back so soon." Tom smiled and sat down next to him. "I told you I wasn't going to leave you hanging, Coach. I've been working on something, and I think we've got a plan." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What kind of plan?" Tom leaned forward, excitement in his voice. "I'm going to help you get back on your feet, Jack. I've already set up a trust fund for you to cover all your debts, your housing expenses, and give you a steady income going forward. But I want to do more than that. I've been talking to a community center in your area. They're looking for someone with your experience to help coach and mentor young athletes. I want to make sure you get back to doing what you love, coaching, teaching, and inspiring the next generation." Jack's eyes widened in disbelief. "Tom, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever expected." Tom smiled, a sense of fulfillment washing over him. "You don't have to say anything, Coach. You've done so much for me over the years. It's time for me to return the favor." As Jack sat there, processing everything Tom had just told him, tears welled up in his eyes. It wasn't just about the money or the trust fund, it was about the recognition, the acknowledgement that his work had mattered, that his contributions had made a lasting impact on someone's life. "Thank you, Tom," Jack finally said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You've given me more than I could ever ask for. You've shown me that the work I did all these years, it wasn't for nothing. It mattered. It really mattered." Tom nodded, his heart full. "You've always believed in me, Coach. Now I'm going to make sure you get the chance to believe in yourself again." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Tom Brady worked tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that Jack Henderson's transition was as smooth as possible. The trust fund was set up, the community center had agreed to bring Jack back as a coach, and Tom made sure to stay in touch with his mentor, offering guidance and support at every turn. But the most important thing wasn't the money or the new job opportunities. It was the emotional transformation that was beginning to take place within Jack. When Tom had first visited him, Jack had been withdrawn, exhausted, and defeated. He had seen no way forward, no hope of ever reclaiming his dignity and confidence. But slowly, as Tom's plan began to unfold, Jack started to change. The burden of financial strain began to lift, and with the opportunity to get back into coaching, he found himself reigniting the passion that had once defined him. The first few days back at the community center were rough. Jack was older now, and it had been a while since he had worked with young athletes. But something within him clicked when he walked onto that field. The familiar sounds of footballs being thrown, the smell of the grass, and the energy of the kids surrounding him brought it all back. He was home. This was what he had been meant to do. The students, too, felt the change. Jack had always been more than just a coach to them. He had been a mentor, a guide, someone who showed them that greatness wasn't just about athletic ability, but about character, perseverance, and giving back to the community. Now, as they saw Jack return to the role they all admired, they too began to feel inspired. They knew his story. They knew the struggles he had faced. And in seeing him come back to life, they learned one of the most important lessons of all, that it wasn't too late to start over, no matter what had happened before. The ripple effect of Tom's decision wasn't just felt by Jack. It reached the kids at the community center, their families, and even the staff at the school where Jack had once coached. They all saw what could happen when someone with a heart for helping others was given the chance to stand tall again. Jack's return to coaching was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of second chances, and a reminder that every act of kindness has far-reaching consequences. The story didn't stop at the community center either. News of Tom's generosity and Jack's transformation began to spread. It wasn't just another feel-good story, it was a movement. People from all over the country, inspired by Tom's actions, reached out to Jack to offer their support. Former players Jack had coached years ago sent messages, thanking him for the lessons he had imparted, and sharing how they had gone on to be successful in their own lives, all thanks to Jack's guidance. One day, a former player named Eric, now a successful entrepreneur, reached out to Tom. Eric had grown up in the same small town as Jack, and he had been one of the kids who had learned from Jack when he was just starting out. "Tom, I heard what you did for Coach Henderson," Eric said over the phone. "I just wanted to let you know that the impact he had on me has lasted my whole life. He taught me more than football. He taught me how to be a man, how to work hard, and how to give back. If there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." This was the kind of ripple effect Tom had hoped for when he first decided to help Jack. It wasn't just about one person, it was about a community coming together, sharing their support, and learning from each other's experiences. Back in Wilmington, Jack found himself doing more than just coaching. He had started to speak at local schools, sharing his story of resilience and determination. He was no longer the coach who had been forgotten, he was now a symbol of hope and strength for others who had faced hardship and adversity. In a small ceremony at the community center, Tom was invited to see firsthand how Jack had transformed the program. The kids were better than ever, the energy in the room was electric, and the pride Jack felt in being able to return to his passion was palpable. He had found his second wind, his purpose once again. The ceremony wasn't about accolades, it was about honoring the impact Jack had made on countless lives, and now, the ripple effect that Tom had started was undeniable. "I've been blessed in more ways than I can count," Jack said during the ceremony, his voice filled with emotion. "But I'm most grateful for the people who believed in me, especially Tom. When you lose everything, it's easy to feel like it's the end. But what I've learned is that it's never too late to start over. Thank you all for giving me a second chance." Tom stood in the crowd, watching Jack as he spoke. He felt a sense of deep fulfillment. What had started as a simple act of kindness, helping a mentor in need, had grown into something much bigger. It wasn't just about Jack. It was about every person whose life had been touched by his return to the game, and every child who would grow up learning the lessons he had passed down. The ripple effect continued to spread. People who had heard the story of Tom's generosity were inspired to give back in their own communities. It wasn't just about money or grand gestures, it was about showing up for the people who needed it most. It was about the power of kindness, of supporting others when they couldn't support themselves, and of using your influence to create a positive change. Tom knew that what he had done for Jack wasn't going to change the world overnight. But it had changed one life. And that was enough. The impact of that one decision would be felt for generations to come, creating a legacy that would last far longer than any football game he had ever played. As Tom left the ceremony that day, he reflected on everything that had happened, the connections that had been restored, the lives that had been touched, and the lessons he had learned along the way. He realized that this was the true meaning of success, not the Super Bowl rings, not the fame, but the ability to lift others up, to be a force for good in a world that often felt divided. Tom Brady had not only helped Jack Henderson get back on his feet, he had reminded the world that greatness isn't about what you accomplish alone, it's about the impact you have on others.